All right, finally managed to deliver. I'm glad I made it in time for this mince delivery. My name is Maggie. Since I was a child, I've loved drawing in sketchbooks with crayons and colored pencils, and that hobby has continued into my adulthood. When I was a student, I worked part-time drawing illustrations, which has become the foundation for my current career. Now, I'm enjoying a freelance life, drawing illustrations at my own pace. In addition to illustrations, I also create small comics depicting the daily lives of modern women in fashion magazines. I've heard encouraging words from my editor, like, "Maggie's drawings get a lot of positive reactions from our readers." And through this job, I met my current husband. He held an important position at a major publishing company I was associated with, and initially, our relationship was strictly professional. However, as we worked together, we grew closer. We bonded over shared past experiences, like losing our fathers at an early age. Before we knew it, we were going out for meals and movies together. After one such meal, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. I had never dated anyone before, so I lacked confidence at first. "Really? You like someone like me? I don't stand out, and I'm just a bit better at drawing than the average person." "That's not true. You're really talented, Maggie, and I love the way you utilize that talent to the fullest." His kind words made my heart flutter. After dating for several years, we decided to get married. After getting married, we enjoyed our newlywed life for a while. Both my husband and I were then approaching 30. I wondered if it was better to have children sooner rather than later. Then, one day, my husband proposed that we live with his mother. I was initially surprised, but I had always yearned for happy family moments since I grew up in a single-parent household after losing my father early on. So, I looked forward to living with my mother-in-law. "Maggie, I have something to discuss. Actually, my mother wants to live with us. What do you think?" "Really? Hasn't your mother always lived alone at her place?" "Yes. She must have her own reasons for wanting this." I was surprised she brought it up to us, newlyweds, but I want to understand her feelings. I hadn't interacted much with my mother-in-law. The only occasions I could do so were during our wedding and other formal occasions. From the start, she seemed very warm and approachable. Her smile and kindness reassured me. My mother has been feeling lonely living by herself. I used to visit frequently, but I've been too busy recently. That must be hard for her. But if she wants to live together, it may be fun living together under one roof. "Really?" "Of course. I don't mind, and I'm looking forward to it." "Thank you, Maggie. That really helps." So, we decided to live with my mother-in-law. My husband was pleased with my decision, and our new life as a family of 3 began. "Maggie, what's your favorite food? I want to make something special for you." "Thank you, mother-in-law. Let me help you with it." "It's fine, Maggie. You relax here." Our cohabitation was going smoothly. My mother-in-law took care of most household chores. I was really grateful for her support, especially because I was exhausted from work. One day, my husband dropped a bombshell. "Maggie, this might come as a shock, but I've been transferred to another region." "What? Really?" I was filled with confusion and anxiety at the sudden news of his transfer. Considering our recent cohabitation, I wondered how this would affect my relationship with my mother-in-law. I thought about ending our living arrangement but couldn't ask my mother-in-law due to the unavoidable nature of the transfer. I also pondered moving with him, but staying in the city was more convenient for my job. "Thanks, Maggie. If you ever have concerns about living with my mother, let me know." I remember feeling a bit relieved by his words. "Thank you, I understand." In the end, I decided to continue living with my mother-in-law, but this decision might have been a bit hasty. At first, our cohabitation was harmonious. We respected each other's preferences and shared household chores. However, after living together for a short while, my mother-in-law began to change her attitude towards me. She assumed I wasn't doing anything. "Maggie, shouldn't you help out a bit more around the house?" "I'm sorry, I'm quite busy right now. I'm working on this tablet." "You say such things, but you're just holed up in the house doing nothing." Even if you draw on that thing, there's no way you can make money from it. No, actually, I work using this tablet, and I support our household with my income. I've explained many times that I work from home, but my mother-in-law didn't believe me. She misunderstood me as a freeloader and asked me to help around the house. I intend to help with household chores as much as I can, but I'm busy with work and can't always help. So I contribute by putting at least $3,000 from my income into the household every month. That's the money my son is giving you, isn't it? There's no way you can pay that amount yourself. No, that's not the case. I tried to explain again, but my mother-in-law wouldn't accept what I said. Despite explaining multiple times that I was contributing a significant amount from my income even though I couldn't help more with the chores, she continued to ignore my words. It was futile, no matter how politely I tried to explain. As time went on, her attitude towards me hardened and she began to berate me. She has never worked since getting married. She occasionally goes out shopping or for lunch with friends, but primarily stays home. Despite this, she was relentless in demanding that I help more around the house, even when I was working hard to support the family. As a result, it sometimes affected my work and caused inconveniences to my colleagues. Under these circumstances, it became difficult for me to maintain credibility and continue working. I needed to find a solution. Then, one day, while I was working in my room, my mother-in-law called out, "Maggie, come to the living room for a moment." I headed to the living room, tablet in hand, to find not only my mother-in-law but also my brother-in-law and his wife, still holding that tablet. "What are you doing?" "I drawing." "Maggie, you still love drawing even as an adult, huh?" My brother-in-law, whose demeanor and attitude were the polar opposite of mine, remarked sarcastically. He was always self-centered, and we've had many clashes even before my marriage, probably because of this. "I'm actually working on this tablet right now." "Work? You're just doodling, right?" LOL. My sister-in-law, with her usual domineering attitude, always looked down on me and threw snide remarks. "No, I'm drawing as a job. We heard from our mother that you can't do household chores or work properly. So, can't you just leave this house? From now on, we're going to live with Mom." They ridiculed and berated me. My mother-in-law looked pleased with the scene. It hurts to be treated this way by family. Since I had urgent work to do, I needed to focus on my tasks. But my mother-in-law didn't like my attitude. "Why are you ignoring me? How rude, especially with that tablet." She yelled. "Wait, mother-in-law, what are you?" Suddenly, she snatched the tablet from me and slammed it on the floor. Why would you do that?" To add insult to injury, my brother-in-law and his wife gleefully stomped on the tablet. The tablet screen cracked in several places, and it wouldn't even turn on. Holding the broken tablet, I was shocked to realize I couldn't continue my work. I tried several times, suppressing my anger to restart my work, but the tablet wouldn't revive. This incident made me realize that continuing to live with my mother-in-law was no longer feasible. So, I shared the incident over the phone with my husband. He was silent for a while, presumably in shock, but then repeatedly apologized. I didn't intend to blame my husband, but I was moved to tears by his kindness. When I told him that I wanted to live with him and not at his parents' house, he was happy. I had previously been worried about living in a remote location due to his transfer, but now I felt that being with him was more important. After deciding to move out, I immediately started preparing to relocate. But during this busy time, a surprising event occurred. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and his wife came to see me. Why are you here all of a sudden?" "I'm quite busy right now," I exclaimed in surprise. "Maggie, we heard you've been contributing $3,000 monthly. We're truly sorry about the other day. We didn't know until our son told us. We had no idea you were contributing so much." I could sense my mother-in-law's intentions. "I've told you this before. Anyway, I've decided to move out and live with my husband. Perhaps they realized that without me, they would lose the monthly financial support." "Maggie, don't say things like that. Let's all build a warm family together. Mother-in-law says if you leave, we have to pay $3,000. That's unbelievable. The reason Maggie got angry and left is because you broke that tablet, right? What are you talking about? It was Mom who broke the tablet first. Besides, all this happened because of Mom's misunderstanding. That's right. It's not mother-in-law's fault. Maggie doesn't do housework or work. She just stays in her room all the time. In fact, it wasn't Maggie who was contributing money to the household. An argument started between my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and his wife. For me, this argument was very bothersome. Without paying any attention to my mother-in-law, as I continued with my moving preparations, adding insult to injury, she said, "Maggie, I have a favor to ask. Without $3,000, we can't make ends meet. Even if you move to my son's place, won't you continue to send us living expenses?" She looked apologetic. Why would I give money to dissolve our cohabitation? I chuckled a bit. Don't say things like that. What should I do from now on? My mother looked troubled. That's absolutely impossible. I shook my head. I don't have any money. Huh? I was putting $3,000 into the household every month, right? I thought that was more than enough for living expenses. After a moment of silence, my mother-in-law confessed, "I spent the money at a nightclub." I was lost for words. "You went to a nightclub? Mom, are you out of your mind?" My brother-in-law also angrily retorted, "Please, can you support my nightclub expenses? After losing my husband, I've been trying so hard to live by myself. You can sympathize with me, right?" My mother-in-law looked like she was about to cry. "Absolutely not." I sighed deeply. My sister-in-law nodded in agreement. My mother-in-law's shoulders dropped. She was probably shocked at the idea of stopping her visits to the nightclub. However, I had no intention of helping her. "Maggie, I'm sorry for the trouble my mother caused. Let's get along from now on." My brother-in-law apologized. "That's impossible. I don't want to live with her and her family." But I firmly refused. After that, I started a peaceful life at the new location where my husband was transferred to. Now, we are enjoying our days in a serene town, and I can work peacefully. During this time, a thought suddenly crossed my mind: the bomb that I had left at my in-laws' place. Just as I was wondering about it, I received a call from my mother-in-law. "Oh, mother-in-law, what's the matter?" "Maggie, what's the deal with the comic you drew?" "Eh? What about the comic I drew?" "You know, the comic you drew is all about our family, right?" Maybe it was. Apparently, the comic drew caused a big uproar at my in-laws' house. It realistically depicted the treatment and words I received from my mother-in-law and the couple, and it seemed to resonate with people of my generation. Although I changed the names of the characters, some relatives knew I was a comic artist, and someone apparently realized it was about my in-laws. My brother-in-law, his wife, and mother-in-law seem to be under fire right now. "Because of you, Maggie, everyone knows our secrets. What should we do?" "But aren't secrets like this bound to come out eventually? Now, how can we face everyone?" They even found out I was going to a nightclub. It might be difficult, but please resolve it yourself. How cruel. Feeling a bit refreshed at my mother-in-law's outcry over the phone, I learned that the family faced many difficulties afterward. Due to the contents of my comic, angry relatives gathered at my in-laws, and it was revealed that my mother-in-law had spent a lot of money at the nightclub and was in debt. The debt was so massive that she couldn't repay it by herself. My in-laws had to sell their house to repay the debt, and my mother-in-law started living with my brother-in-law and his wife. It seems she started a part-time job to repay the debt, but it was a tough situation. My brother-in-law and his wife, already struggling financially, faced even more challenges living with my mother-in-law. Eventually, my sister-in-law couldn't take it anymore and left the house after an affair, leaving my brother-in-law deeply depressed. Although I feel sympathy, I can't help but think they brought it upon themselves. As for us, we are enjoying our new life in the countryside. Shortly after moving here, we were blessed with our long-awaited baby. Initially, I was anxious about moving from the city to the countryside. But this area, blessed with beautiful nature, has become an ideal living environment. With the stress gone, we are enjoying a comfortable life. Furthermore, my previous comic was well received, leading to a new fashion magazine job, so both my personal and professional lives are progressing smoothly. I can't help but feel grateful to my mother-in-law and her family for the opportunity to move forward. My name is Lucy. Currently, I live with my husband, Alex, in the same house with his parents. We bought this house 3 years after we got married, but soon after we moved in, Alex's parents suddenly showed up saying, "We can't thank you enough for buying a house for us." They brought a lot of luggage, and there was even a moving truck parked behind. As I stood there in shock, Alex nonchalantly walked past me and said, "Dad, Mom, I've been waiting. Come in." Alex's mother said to me, "Lucy, we're counting on you from now on," and proceeded into the house. However, seeing the amount of their luggage, I felt they intended to live here, so I quickly asked Alex, "What's going on?" In response to my question, Alex said, "What's so strange? We bought this house to live with my parents, so I brought them here." I was shocked. I had once mentioned the possibility of living with my parents to Alex, but I had never touched on the subject of living with his parents. Moreover, why did the situation of living with his parents suddenly arise? I was terribly confused. Living with my parents was also a plan for the future, not something immediate. And why did Alex invite his parents without discussing it with me? I asked Alex this when I saw his parents starting to bring their luggage into the room. He seemed to understand that he hadn't discussed living together with me, scratching his cheek and saying, "Well, if we're going to live together, I'd rather it be with my own parents. Otherwise, wouldn't your parents take over this place?" I was so surprised that I just replied, "Huh?" When I had talked about living with my parents, he had agreed. But perhaps he had agreed then just to avoid a confrontation with me. And by inviting his parents first, he prevented my parents from moving in. What are you really thinking? You agreed before when I said my parents would eventually live with us, but now you suddenly brought your own parents. Are they really going to live here? I've been thinking a lot too, but you didn't wait for my response and rushed for an answer, so I couldn't say no at that moment. I didn't rush you at all. I just asked for your opinion. I wanted to live with my parents. Then you should have made that clear when I brought up the topic of living together. Stop acting like a child. Living with Alex, I've realized that he has a very childlike personality. Whenever I do something, he comes over curious, asking, "What are you doing?" Maybe children are easier to deal with. If a child shows interest in household chores, you can suggest, "Want to try?" and they might engage. But Alex asserts, housework is not a man's job. I thought that dealing with a childish adult might be more troublesome than an actual child. Apparently overhearing our argument, my mother-in-law started keeping my distance, advising, "Lucy, you might feel dissatisfied over trivial matters between husband and wife, but some compromise is necessary." I sensed a demand in her words. My in-laws seem to view me merely as an appendage to their son. If they think I'm just an accessory making a fuss about not wanting to live together, her behavior makes sense. From my perspective, Alex is the accessory, but they don't seem to see it that way. My mother-in-law was eager to help with household chores, but their attitude was grating on my nerves. This situation continued, and as I pondered how to respond to their attitude, Alex's sister, Kate, visited. Kate is 5 years younger than me, already married 3 times and currently living with a new husband. When I returned home, Kate was already there. "Welcome back, Lucy. I heard about it. You stood up to my brother and tried to kick our parents out of this house," she said. I was shocked and looked sharply at Alex sitting beside me. Why would Alex tell such a lie? Is it to make me look like the enemy? Alex wilted under my gaze, averting his eyes. If he feels awkward, he shouldn't have chosen words that blame me in the first place. Then Kate, who had been observing, stood up as if to protect Alex. "Lucy, if you're going to make such a face, please leave. Just as I heard, you are a demon wife. It's bad for prenatal education to have you around." Being suddenly told to leave, I was confused about which part of the house she was referring to. For a moment, I thought she wanted me to leave Alex's room where he was enjoying conversation with his sister, but that didn't seem to be Kate's intention. She stroked her belly and said, "I'm planning to give birth in my hometown. So, Lucy, I don't want you in the house. At least until my child comes into this world." Confused, I replied, "What do you mean?" "Wow, Lucy, that face is scary. No wonder my brother avoids you. You might be close to getting divorced." Kate was teasing me with a smirk on her face. When I looked towards Alex, he was avoiding my gaze, looking down. Even if the other person is a dear sister, anyone would stop her from criticizing their wife. However, just as Kate pointed out, maybe Alex is getting tired of me. But being told such things, my interest in him also wanes. I can't forgive him for inviting his parents to live with us without my permission and for speaking ill of me to his parents and sister. His attitude seemed to belittle me. Why should I continue to treat such a person with affection? I felt my feelings for him growing cold. And since there was no room decided, "I'll be using your room. Please organize your belongings. Now, big brother, say something too. It's been hard for you because of the demon wife, right?" Alex hung his head at Kate's words but stood up, pulled up by her forceful hand. Prompted by her, he gave a strained smile and said, "My important sister is going to give birth here, so we don't need you. You can sleep on the streets or something." Reflecting on the 3 years of marriage, I took a deep breath and replied, "All right." Kate exclaimed with joy, raising both hands. "Really? I'm so happy." Alex let out a sigh of relief as I didn't respond with anger. However, in my heart, I decided to give appropriate punishment to Alex, Kate, and my in-laws. One evening, during a family dinner, I presented Alex with divorce papers. His face was a picture of surprise. "Sign the divorce papers. You want me to leave this house, right? If you don't sign, I'll stay here." "If that's the case, big brother, why don't you sign?" But in the end, I think Lucy won't file them. I often use that trick too. Get them to sign, and if you don't want to divorce, just follow along. It seemed Kate had used these papers in the past to manipulate situations to her advantage. Such a person is bound to be divorced, I thought, but she seemed oblivious. Alex, accepting Kate's suggestion, signed the divorce papers without hesitation. It bothered me that he misunderstood my intention, thinking I presented the papers just as a threat. Normally, such documents aren't presented without the intention to divorce. However, getting his signature so easily made me feel a bit lighter. Now, I could take full revenge on them. The divorce was finalized, and I promptly organized my belongings. At that time, Kate was back home, confirming her plans for childbirth. Hence, she said she didn't intend to come to the house until my belongings were properly stored and the room was cleaned. As a result, I was diligently packing up after returning from work. In the meantime, I found and signed a lease for an apartment suitable for singles and began the process of selling the house. After moving my necessary belongings to the new apartment, I visited my in-laws' house. There, I found Alex, Kate, and my in-laws, all 4 of them together. Knowing that my father-in-law and Alex would be off work that day, and that my mother-in-law and Kate didn't work, I decided to visit when all of them were present. My sudden visit surprised all 4 of them. Moreover, when I arrived, 3 of them, except Kate, seemed to have been enjoying alcohol since the afternoon. In their presence, Alex was saying, "Lucky that woman left. She thought if she got angry, everything would go as she wanted. She acted so arrogantly, troubling me." My mother-in-law responded, "Indeed, Lucy had a somewhat difficult personality." The reason I was angry with Alex was that he started living with his parents and even made me leave the house for his sister, all without discussing it with me. I was angry because of his unreasonable actions. However, it seems within the in-laws family, I am somehow perceived as the bad one. Listening further, remember the girl I introduced earlier? It seems he started dating her, but she's a better match than the previous sister-in-law, right? I think a more adorable woman suits my brother better. They discussed his shocking affair. If their relationship started a week ago, that was when I was already proceeding with the divorce, so I guess it won't be an issue of infidelity. But still, his actions infuriated me. I briskly opened the room door and checked the faces of the chatting in-law family. The four of them seemed not to expect my return and were surprised. I came with the real estate agent. Lucy? Who is that man behind you? Alex asked, pointing to the man behind me. Before I could say anything, Kate exclaimed, "Isn't that sister-in-law's new partner? Brother, this is infidelity. Let's make her support us financially." In the midst of everyone thinking Alex and I are still married, I've lost all patience with Kate, who, despite having introduced Alex to a new lover, is now making a fuss demanding money. Amidst this, the real estate agent handed a business card to my father-in-law and greeted him. Looking at the card, my father-in-law wondered, "Why is someone from real estate here?" The agent replied, "To appraise the value of this house." My in-laws exchanged glances and started laughing. "We plan to continue living here, so no appraisal is needed." However, the agent clearly stated, "Actually, this house is in Lucy's name. She wishes to sell it, so we are proceeding with the sale." Upon hearing this, my in-laws showed expressions of surprise, seemingly unaware of this fact. Perhaps Alex hadn't accurately conveyed this information. Alex said he would explain the details himself, so I left it alone. However, from my in-laws' attitude, it was clear that they had not received this information. They seemed to think I was just a burden and that Alex was supporting me by buying this house. So, I planned to explain the truth about the house's ownership and financial aspects to Alex and his parents if the situation didn't improve after a while. However, before I could explain, Alex's sister Kate appeared and kicked me out of the house as the owner. Therefore, I judged that dialogue with this in-law family became difficult and decided to take direct action. That action was to find a new home for myself, complete the move, and then promptly sell this house. Alex seemed to take Kate's words at face value and was complacent, thinking I wouldn't divorce. Seeing Alex's surprised face, I sighed inwardly. Since I, the owner, was kicked out of this house, it makes sense to sell it. It might be, but this residence is mine as well, and since we're married, it's also yours. Right now, my parents and sister are living here too. So what? Whether you or your family are here, it's irrelevant to me. Besides, we divorced quite some time ago. You signed the divorce papers, right? I submitted them to the city hall immediately. At my words, Alex seemed shocked and said, "What?" He seemed to think the divorce papers were just a threat. Disappointed, I sighed again. Then Kate started accusing, "Such an unforgivable woman. This she-devil, using my brother's money to get the house and then putting it in your name. I wonder who she thinks is the cause of this situation." I stared at Kate. "Your beloved brother actually doesn't have any money. He's working, but all his income goes to repaying borrowed money. Why does my brother have debts? Isn't that because he paid your living expenses?" Kate had been married 3 times, but 2 of them ended due to her infidelity. Each time she would say, "Please keep it a secret from my parents. I don't have the funds, so help me," and Alex would comply with her unreasonable requests. At first, I didn't notice, but then I discovered that the savings we were supposed to be building together had significantly decreased and confronted Alex about it. It turned out that Alex had been giving living expenses to his sister Kate without telling me. Despite this, I resolved the house payments using my own savings. I was beyond surprised and felt utter disdain for him for giving his sister such amount of money. Even if he said he would pay back the money in the future, I could no longer trust his word. I hired a lawyer. It was to recover our joint savings that he had squandered. Before I could share this fact, his parents, learning about their daughter's infidelity, exploded in anger. All her past divorces, she said they were due to personality clashes. To think Kate was unfaithful. Such a dirty child. We didn't raise our children to be adulterers. Wait, Mom, Dad, it's just Lucy talking nonsense. This isn't true. Perhaps feeling disadvantaged in this situation, even Alex, who doted on Kate so much, exclaimed, "It's all your fault. Because of all the money I gave to you to support your life, I ended up in debt, and because of you, Lucy and I had to divorce." Hearing this, I said, "Is it really all Kate's fault? It was your decision to suddenly bring your parents to my house, wasn't it? It was you who collaborated with your family to label me a wicked wife. And to think, just because your sister is your favorite, you plan to drive me out of the house, eventually leaving me to live on the streets? That's ridiculous." He tried to cling to my leg, but I kicked him away. "I'll be getting back all the money I paid on your behalf. Prepare yourself, I'm coming with my lawyer tomorrow." With that, I left the house. While we were talking, the house valuation was completed. Fortunately, it looks like the house will be sold as I hoped. The next day, when I showed up with my lawyer and explained the list of expenses he had wasted, his parents, looking at it seriously, said so much money existed, yet because of Kate's actions. They glared sternly at Kate, who was at the corner of the room. It seems his parents came to the house believing Alex's words about taking care of things from now on. But Alex's lies and Kate's adulterous actions had destabilized their retirement life, and they were furious. Alex incurred additional debt. After that, he was immediately kicked out of the house and ended up living in a simple apartment with his family. Kate, facing condemnation from her family, decided to live with her husband for a while and gave birth. However, since the child's hair color was clearly not her husband's, she was kicked out of that house as well. It was difficult for Kate to raise her child properly, and the child was placed in an institution. Kate, with nowhere to go, seemed to have no choice but to return to her condemning family. It seems she is still being asked for money by Alex, but I am free. I am enjoying my independent life and considering trying something new in the future. My name is Jessica, and I work from home, taking care of my father-in-law at my in-laws' house. It seems that my father-in-law has always been dedicated to his work, but he overdid it and injured his back, causing his overall health to decline. Since my mother-in-law is elderly and couldn't take care of him alone, I agreed to live with my husband, Peter, at his parents' house and help out. The family home is a spacious single-story house that has been around since my father-in-law's father's time. Maybe it's because of living in such a big house, but both my mother-in-law and Peter are a bit arrogant. Despite being a housewife, my mother-in-law says that she can't live a commoner's life, and Peter, even though he doesn't earn much, insists, "I'm different from the average person." I've come to know their arrogance since living with them. But as they do enough housework to compensate for their lavish spending, I've kept silent. It seems that my father-in-law shares the same sentiment as me. However, due to his health issues, he confided in me that it was difficult to contribute any more money to the family. My father-in-law understands that Peter doesn't earn much, and considering the attitudes of both my mother-in-law and Peter, it wasn't an atmosphere where they could openly discuss it. Understanding my father-in-law's feelings, I decided to be a pillar of strength for this family. I could manage my father-in-law's caregiving while working from home, because I only need to support him when necessary. My mother-in-law left the caregiving to me and continued her life as if nothing had changed, doing housework and going out with her friends. Jessica, I'm sorry. If it wasn't for my bad back, I wouldn't have had to trouble you like this. Please don't apologize. You've worked hard for the family all this time. Now, please rest. My father-in-law smiled with relief at my words. But perhaps due to his previous overwork, he gradually lost his strength. When he and I went to the hospital for his checkup, we discovered that he had cancer, which was a shock to both of us. When I told my mother-in-law and Peter about the cancer, they were shocked. They bombarded him with questions about how long he had left and how much the treatment would cost. It surprised me that my mother-in-law and Peter, who hadn't talked much with my father-in-law since his health declined, suddenly showed an interest in talking to him. One day, when Peter was at work and my mother-in-law was out with a friend, my father-in-law spoke to me. The reason those two asked about my remaining time and treatment costs is probably because they're eyeing my inheritance. They must be planning to keep me in good spirits until I die, wondering how much I'll leave them. Jessica, this might cause you some discomfort, but I'm on your side. Thank you for not abandoning our family. As my father-in-law said, Peter and my mother-in-law seemed displeased that I spent a lot of time with him, and they started making snide remarks. Come to think of it, why does my daughter-in-law stay at home all the time without doing any housework? My mother-in-law started talking to Peter during dinner. Peter grimaced and replied, I don't know. She quit her job without telling me and started staying at home. It's really annoying. Maybe she came to this house aiming for Dad's money. They started saying such mean things right in front of me. We usually ate dinner with just the three of us, my mother-in-law, Peter, and I, as my father-in-law ate in his own room. Left without any support, I was forced to hear harsh words from both of them. I am working, I tried to argue, but was told, what are you talking about? You haven't worked since you came to this house. Don't lie when you haven't earned a single penny. The reason we can live comfortably is because Peter goes out and works for us. You do nothing all day and just idle around the house. They made these accusations without even checking what I was doing at home, thinking that continuing my meal here would only result in more complaints. I decided to take the meal to my father-in-law's room. But at that moment, my mother-in-law snatched the tray from my hands. I have no intention of letting a woman like you, who's after my husband's money, serve him food. I will take it myself. I had been preparing nutritious meals based on my father-in-law's requests. But my mother-in-law pretended not to know that and tried to take the completed meal as if she made it by herself. I was disappointed in my mother-in-law's scheming and credit-stealing behavior. Thinking that arguing would only trouble my father-in-law, I said to my mother-in-law, please go ahead and let her serve the meal. Peter and his mother were trying to separate me from my father-in-law. Even when my father-in-law was hospitalized, I was not allowed to visit him. However, I was in contact with my father-in-law through my mobile phone. It seemed that Peter and his mother, fearing that I might inherit some of my father-in-law's estate since I had been caring for him, were trying to turn him against me. Despite the fact that it was Peter and his mother who were keeping me away from my father-in-law, I was disgusted to hear that they were saying I disliked taking care of him. It seems that my father-in-law just nodded along and ignored their words in order to protect me from further blame from them. Jessica, those two said you took money from the house and even talked about divorce. My father-in-law's message made me laugh. There had been no talk of divorce from Peter, and for some reason, they were not trying to kick me out of the house either. Perhaps they wanted to keep an eye on my movements. Since my father-in-law and I were close, they probably thought that if I was kicked out of the house, I would be free to go and visit him. Indeed, if I divorced Peter and was kicked out of the house, I would be free from their constraints and would visit my benefactor, my father-in-law. Peter and his mother seemed to understand me well. Afterwards, I continued my remote work, enduring criticism from Peter and his mother and keeping in touch with my father-in-law. However, half a year later, my father-in-law passed away. I busied myself with arranging the funeral in order to endure my grief. Peter and his mother did not help with the funeral arrangements, so I arranged things as my father-in-law had wished. About a week after the funeral, there was an incident. While I was working from home, Peter and his mother suddenly came into the room. They had never entered my room like this before, so I was surprised, but quickly saved my data and turned off my computer. What's wrong? Don't you realize what you're doing? I know you've been embezzling the household's money. It seems you also received money from my husband. What a despicable woman. What do you mean? I could not understand a word of what my mother-in-law was saying. I had never received any money from my father-in-law. I had no idea how there could be such a misunderstanding. In my confusion, Peter glared at me and then said, "You cozied up to my dad, showing off your youth to get his money. You betrayed me, your own husband." I wished he wouldn't make such baseless and dirty assumptions. I had always valued my relationship with my father-in-law and had sincerely taken care of him. I never did anything to cozy up to him. Aren't you misunderstanding? I never did anything like that. However, they didn't believe me. They began packing up my belongings without my consent. Wait a minute, please. You need to leave this house. I have prepared the divorce papers, so sign them quickly and then go turn them in. Peter yelled this, throwing the divorce papers at me. As expected, they were afraid I would visit my father-in-law in the hospital, and that's why they hadn't brought up divorce before. You are no longer needed in this house. Get out, you bum. My mother-in-law yelled at me, throwing clothes at me. Peter hurled insults at me, saying, "You freeloader," and handed me a pen to sign the divorce papers. After being treated so horribly, I knew there was no point in staying in this house. Since my father-in-law's funeral was over, I quickly signed the divorce papers. Okay, I'll leave. I'll pack my things myself so you don't need to help me. As I said that, Peter and his mother, who had no intention of helping, left the room looking relieved. I packed my belongings, found a new place to live, and promptly left their house. When I informed Peter and my mother-in-law that I had submitted the divorce papers, they were pleased. They would be having a hard time from here on out, so they should enjoy this moment while it lasts. Within a month of me leaving the house, Peter called. I was working and ignored his call, but later, I received an email from him. "Hey, all the money in the house is gone. You stole it, didn't you?" Now I was being accused of theft. I hadn't stolen anything. My father-in-law had kept the money securely, and there wasn't any readily accessible cash in the house, so even if they searched, they wouldn't find any. We should discuss the money when we talk about the inheritance. I replied to his email, but I received no reply from him. It seemed that he had completely forgotten about the inheritance discussion. After a while, I received contact about setting up a meeting regarding the inheritance. I had decided not to block their contact until I was called for such a meeting, so I headed to my former in-law's house as instructed. It's odd to call it my in-law's house since Peter and I are now divorced. When I arrived, my mother-in-law, Peter, and another man in a suit were waiting in the living room. When the man read the will, Peter and my mother-in-law turned pale. The majority of my father-in-law's estate was left to me, the house to my mother-in-law, and the remaining money to Peter. Hearing this, my mother-in-law screamed, "That's a lie. Why does this woman inherit the majority of the estate? The only family of that man are myself and Peter. This woman is a stranger." The man in the suit was shocked at how Peter's mother dramatically changed, almost lunging forward in her agitation. Peter glared at me and said, "It's ridiculous that most of the inheritance is going to you. Did you manipulate Dad or something?" Determined to end my relationship with Peter and my mother-in-law, I decided to ask something that had been on my mind. "By the way, why did you think I was getting money from your father?" Stop changing the subject. I just want to clear up any doubts since we won't be involved with each other anymore. Can you just tell me? Dad said it last time. "Jessica, money every month." His words were broken because he wasn't fully conscious, but he definitely said it. That means Dad was lending you money every month, right? You've got it backwards. What? Finally, I understood why Peter and my mother-in-law had mistakenly thought that I was borrowing money from my father-in-law. In reality, I was the one contributing about $5,500 every month to my father-in-law, or rather, to their house. Maybe he was talking about me providing $5,500 monthly as living expenses. He used to apologize for taking money from me every month. What? $5,500 every month? Why were you contributing money to the house? Because neither you nor your mother contributed a single penny, despite your father being unable to work anymore. That's why I was supporting this house. I felt uncomfortable not contributing while living here, but still, $5,500. The maintenance of your big house and your mother's spending made it that much. But I wanted to enjoy the good food and other benefits that came with it, so I kept quiet. I had been satisfied with our life because I had my father-in-law on my side and I wasn't particularly troubled, so I never mentioned anything to Peter or my mother-in-law. But I was very surprised that most of the inheritance would be coming to me. If the majority of the inheritance doesn't go to Peter and my mother-in-law, it will be difficult for them to pay the house's maintenance and other living expenses. How could you afford to pay $5,500 every month? You weren't working, were you? I told you that I was working from home, remember? We had that conversation before I moved in. Have you forgotten? Did you tell me something like that? Apparently, Peter had completely forgotten about our conversation. I was astounded. If Peter didn't remember our conversation, my mother-in-law probably didn't know either. Both of them must have thought I was unemployed. If I wasn't working, it would mean that I was just idling around at home every day after my father-in-law was hospitalized. But I'm not the type to do nothing and just expect to be taken care of. Then, let's start over, you and me. What? I couldn't believe my ears. I asked for a divorce because I thought you were a freeloader. You must have been upset and signed the divorce papers thinking you were being abandoned. If you're not unemployed, there's no reason for us to be divorced. What? I don't understand. You love me, right? You must have hated divorcing me. I'm saying that I'll take back the divorce, so come back home. What a joke. Why should I take care of you and your mother? I stayed because your father was kind, and I wanted to repay him, but I have no love left for you and your mother. You always insulted me and were sarcastic. Why should I keep supporting people like that? Your feelings for me, have they cooled off? Of course, there's no love left. At this moment, Peter was receiving the biggest shock of his life. He must have genuinely believed that I was still infatuated with him. All this time, instead of being on my side, he conspired with my mother-in-law to kick me out of the house. If he thought that I still liked him after that, he's a complete fool. I sighed deeply. My mother-in-law, advised by the man in the suit, finally understood that they would receive hardly any inheritance and was deeply disappointed. You and your mother will have to live together from now on. I won't support you with any more of my money. With your monthly salary of $2,000, you will have to adjust your lifestyles. I had no intention whatsoever of renouncing my inheritance rights for Peter and my mother-in-law. I am not that kind-hearted. Ignoring their demands for money, I left the house. I had no plans to interact with Peter and my mother-in-law in the future, so I blocked their contact and changed my mobile phone. Of course, Peter and my mother-in-law don't know my current address. After a while, I heard that Peter and my mother-in-law had visited my parents' house. My parents live far away, and I was surprised to hear that they had suddenly shown up there. According to my mother, Peter and my mother-in-law seemed to think that I was living there. Bring out Jessica immediately. Even if we're divorced, she is still my wife. All the wife's money is mine. I will never forgive her for running away with my property. If you hide her, I can't promise what will happen to you. Peter and my mother-in-law were shouting in front of my parents' house. My parents were frightened and immediately called the police. Surprisingly, when the police arrived, Peter and my mother-in-law assaulted the officers, injuring them, and were then taken into custody. I learned that they had sold the large house they lived in and moved to a rundown apartment. However, they still continued their lavish lifestyle and naturally fell into financial difficulty. They resorted to crime, like stealing beef from the local supermarket, showing a serious decline in their overall situation. Knowing they had no intention of earning money and were prone to criminal behavior, I became terrified. Now it seems that they are incarcerated. If they are ever released from prison, to prevent them from finding me, I have told people around me about them and ensured that my personal information remains confidential. My parents are also selling their current house and starting a new life in the countryside, as they had planned before, so Peter and my mother-in-law won't be able to find them. My name is Lucy. I live with my husband, Michael. We first met back in our student days. We started dating soon after and continued our relationship through the transition from students to working adults. Then, Michael proposed, and that led us to marriage. Since we had a loving relationship and lived together, other than the fact of being officially married, not much changed after the wedding, and we have been living peacefully as a couple without any conflicts. We were seen by our in-laws as a harmonious and peaceful pair. However, our gentle nature may have seemed too soft to those two. Those two refers to my sister-in-law, Emily, and her husband, Richard. They had married 2 years before us. Having been with Michael for a long time, I was well aware of his sister's marriage, too. However, it seemed that Emily's wedding wasn't entirely smooth. She seemed to be the type who cared about appearances, declaring, "I will only invite women who look less attractive than me to my wedding," leaving her parents-in-law bewildered. I wonder what her friends, who were invited to the wedding, would think if they heard that. She must not have considered that at all to be able to say such things. I was told she uttered those words in front of the friends she invited, and the room was instantly enveloped in silence. One woman said, "Isn't that too much?" But she retorted, "Stop being jealous of me. You should be grateful I invited you all, who are almost in your 30s. Whether Richard's friends see you all as potential partners is another matter," and that made the atmosphere even colder. Despite being such a rude person, I couldn't understand why Richard doesn't divorce her. But the answer was quite simple. Richard, just like Emily, is someone who makes impolite comments. Far from admonishing Emily for mocking their wedding guests, Richard added insult to injury by saying, "Emily, it's cruel to confront them with the truth. Even ugly people have feelings." As a result, more of their own friends kept their distance from them. Even those who weren't invited to the wedding cut their ties with them after hearing stories from the attendees. While friends can sever connections, we, being relatives, find it hard to do so. This apartment is quite splendid. Normally, you'd think of a detached house as a mansion, but with this much space, even an apartment can be called a mansion. Emily suddenly visited our apartment and expressed her impression as she looked around. I was baffled by her unexpected visit. However, she proceeded to walk down the hall, opening doors one after another. All I could do was stand there, dumbfounded. Michael, her own brother, was just as surprised, standing with his mouth agape. While we were stunned, Emily freely snooped around our home. "Where are the beer and snacks?" Richard asked us, opening the fridge without permission. I couldn't help but be astonished by the audacity of my brother-in-law and his wife. In any typical household, opening doors and refrigerators without asking is considered rude, something we're all taught. I was just dumbfounded by their inability to follow such basic courtesy. "I'm sorry, but may I ask what brings you here today?" I inquired after taking a deep breath to compose myself. "Didn't you invite Mom and Dad over to this apartment? It only makes sense that I, as your sister, would be welcome too, right? By the way, why haven't you offered any tea yet?" she declared while munching on snacks she found in the kitchen cabinet without our consent. Eating snacks from the shelf without asking, then demanding tea? With a heavy heart, I served tea to Emily and Richard. It's true that a few days ago, we did invite my parents-in-law over, but that was for a special reason, not to show off our home. The term invite felt a bit off to begin with. "I bet you served Mom and Dad some delicious sweets and fancy tea, huh? After all, you need to stay in Dad's good books, don't you?" she said, looking at us with an uncomfortable gaze, laced with sarcasm. Neither Michael nor I could think of any reason to ingratiate ourselves with my father-in-law. We've never used flattery just to attract his attention. We just couldn't grasp whatever Emily was trying to say. "What are you getting at, Emily?" "We're not trying to get Dad to like us or anything," Michael inquired. With a chuckle, Emily retorted, "You wouldn't be able to stay at the company if you don't lick his boots, right?" Michael and I exchanged glances, puzzled. True, my father-in-law runs a business, and Michael is one of his employees. But Michael works there earnestly. Under his father, who doesn't play favorites, he's been through tough training and now holds a position managing a team. There's no need for sycophancy to keep his job. Of course, it's only proper to show due respect to his father, the CEO of the company. I'm the center of the family, and Michael came into the picture later, right? So Michael should be concerned about Dad's feelings and mine. If I get upset, I could just ask Dad to kick you out of the company, she asserted confidently. Michael and I could only exchange looks. We had absolutely no idea what she was aiming for. Richard smirked proudly as Emily declared that we'd lose our jobs if we didn't bow down to her. I probably wasn't the only one who felt uncomfortable under his gaze. After making remarks beyond our comprehension, they left. They left behind scattered snacks and spilled tea. Sighing, we began to clean up quickly. What was she trying to say? That she'd have me fired? Michael murmured, "Does Emily really have a say in personnel decisions?" I asked, and Michael shook his head. "No way. As you know, Dad's not especially soft on family members. If anything, he's pretty strict." Seeing Dad's strictness makes me think. Mom spoiled Emily too much when she was young, he said, right? Dad wouldn't give Emily special treatment, that's for sure, I agreed. My mother-in-law coddled young Emily to an extreme and now deeply regrets it, saying she wishes she could hide in a hole for how she raised her. I can't help but feel pity for my parents-in-law, for the disappointment they must feel towards their daughter's transformation into someone they didn't intend her to be. But why did Emily say she would fire you? Was there some kind of trouble? That's a real mystery. Michael and I could only shrug in confusion. No matter how much we ponder, Emily's true intentions were beyond us. Deciding not to dwell on it, I moved on to the next task at hand. That task was preparing to move. With this, most of the packing is done. Next is the big move, After completing the paperwork and shipping the boxes, I took a flight to France. What was happening back in our home in the US was beyond my imagination. Upon landing in France and turning on my phone, I discovered over 10 voicemail messages from Emily. Surprised, I thought of my in-laws. Despite my reservations, I immediately contacted her. "Emily, I just checked my phone. Is everything okay?" I asked urgently. The reply I received was completely unexpected. Finally got through to you. Since you didn't respond, Richard and I had a delightful time on your and Michael's bed, she said. What? I couldn't comprehend what she was saying and just tilted my head in confusion. Emily sounded pleased, so it seemed unlikely that anything had happened to my in-laws. "So, I'm at your apartment now. You both seem to be away and we're just enjoying this luxurious space," she continued. "Apartment? Our apartment where we used to live? Why are you there? And what do you mean by delightful time with your husband?" I asked, bewildered. I was just holding my head, confused. I had known of Emily and Richard's impudence, but I never imagined it would come to this. They had prepared a spare key to use in our absence. This seemed to have been planned all along. "Oh yes, I got rid of all your stuff," she exclaimed. "What?" I was in shock, because this wonderful home is ours now. We'll set aside Michael's things until he comes to pick them up. I've disliked you since way back. This is my revenge, she declared. I see. You were critical even at your own wedding about others' appearances. I never thought you'd turn that criticism on me. Before evaluating others' faces, you should take a look at the darkness in your own heart, I said. She seemed perplexed. You said you disposed of my things, right? I asked to confirm. Yes, I threw them out. By the way, what was with your stuff? There were several albums, but not a single photo of you in them. They were all pictures with Michael at the center. And in all of them, he's not even looking at the camera. You really have no skill in taking photos. The albums were creepy, so I threw them out this morning, she bragged. Emily proudly detailed how she had thrown everything away. She boasted about discarding the clothes in the closet, the books and diaries on the bookshelves, and selling the computer and other electronics to someone she knew. I didn't get upset or raise my voice because those belongings weren't mine. So, how about it? Aren't you going to cry and ask me why I threw them away? If you cry, won't your face become even uglier? She taunted. Sorry to burst your bubble while you're enjoying throwing away someone else's stuff. But just so you know, Michael and I got divorced and I now live overseas, I informed her. What? That means the things you disposed of weren't mine. Wait a minute. You lived in this apartment with Michael, right? And Michael's clothes are still here. How can Michael's things be here and not yours? That's because I left the apartment when we got divorced. No way. You two always seemed so happy together. Emily's surprise was understandable. Nonetheless, Michael and I were indeed divorced. Actually, I split up with Michael because of your parents' request. What? Remember the photos in the album you said you threw away? The ones where Michael isn't looking at the camera? Yes, I remember. But those photos were taken by a woman who was obsessed with Michael. They're candid. That's why he wasn't looking at the camera. What? Michael and I had been troubled by that woman for a long time. We hoped she would give up on him once we were married. However, things were not that simple. She was convinced Michael was her destiny and interfered with our marriage multiple times. We managed not to invite her to the wedding, but her furious father turned out to be the head of a major corporation that my father-in-law, as a business owner, respected. Disregarding my daughter's feelings and proceeding with another woman? What's the meaning of this? If you don't marry my daughter, your business is over, he threatened without hesitation. When I mentioned this, Emily seemed lost for words in shock. After a moment, I called out, "Hello," and she snapped back, asking cautiously, "That woman, is she Rachel by any chance?" "Yes, that's right. You know Rachel, don't you? I heard she's your and Michael's childhood friend." That Rachel, is it really that Rachel? It seemed Rachel had misunderstood their childhood friendship as something more and had harbored this misconception for years. Suddenly, Emily's cheerful tone changed drastically. "Don't tell me. After you got divorced and left this apartment, Rachel moved in to live here with Michael." "Exactly. So the photo albums, clothes, and diaries I got rid of they would all belong to Rachel, wouldn't they?" The moment she realized the situation, she inadvertently gasped. It seemed Rachel was someone Emily would rather avoid. Emily must have wanted to avoid unnecessary involvement with a woman whose father runs an even larger corporation than her own father. But now it's too late. "Hey, Lucy, can't we do something even now? If you come over quickly and explain you did it out of spite because she took Michael away. As I mentioned before, I'm overseas now, so I can't be there instantly." "Bro, she'll definitely scold me. She's the type to bring her parents into even the smallest conflict and press the issue to the end. And to think I did it with my husband on the bed that was meant for her and Michael. It's too late for regrets now, and honestly, it's best to just tell the truth, don't you think?" "I can't do that." "Oh, I know. I'll clean up quickly and hide somewhere. I'm going to run away. If anyone asks, I'll just say Lucy caused it all." I told her that would be difficult. "Why would that be difficult?" "Because I accepted a substantial amount of money from Rachel to put some distance with her dream life with Michael, and I moved overseas to live a life I've always dreamed of. I've already told her that, but she was worried I might come back for Michael. So she gave me her contact information, insisting I call her as soon as I arrived overseas. I just sent her a photo of myself here and a screenshot from Messenger confirming you and Richard entered the apartment without permission. She just contacted me saying she's already at the apartment." Oh, wait, there's the intercom." With those words, the call ended. Presumably, Rachel, accompanied by her father's men, swiftly took care of Emily and Richard. While Emily and Rachel's standoff continued, I focused on settling into my new life here. "Sorry I'm late, Lucy," Michael said with a smile as he hurried over to me at the airport. Because she was unable to give up on Michael, Rachel watched us dissolve our relationship in front of her, and we decided to hastily escape abroad. It was convenient for us as my in-laws and their company were at a standstill, possibly considering liquidation. Emily had long believed she would take over the company, but now faced the reality of it shutting down without having worked today. In the end, Rachel forced Emily and Richard into hard labor at a company her father owned, angry that they had tainted her home. Surprisingly, Rachel began to show affection towards Richard, and now Emily is left to work alone, struggling to pay off her debt to Rachel. We decided to enjoy our peaceful days in a new land, free from the troubles of Rachel and the burdensome siblings-in-law.